Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where today we are taking a look at every single top Era 3 heavy in Cold War. Now a caveat that I need to add right at the start here is that the Japanese line has been announced, but I'm recording this of March of 2025 and the Japanese line hasn't arrived. I have no idea what vehicles will be in that line. If there's a heavy at the top, then I will add my rating and ranking for it in the top pinned comment on this video. If there is no pinned comment, then that means the top Japanese tank is a medium and is therefore irrelevant to this list. Okay, with that out of the way, let's now take a look at how I rate the 9 Era 3 heavies that we have at the moment. And this, starting with number 9, starting with the worst first, the Object 640. This is, well, otherwise known as the Black Eagle. This is not that old to Cold War. The Object 640 hasn't been in the game all that long, but it finds itself at the bottom, which is a bit of a shame. But hey, something needs to take bottom place, and in my case, the Object 640 takes bottom place. And why is that? Well, let's quickly go over the stats. So, 606mm of pen on standard rounds, 697mm of pen on gold, and 750 on secondary ATGMs. Primary and gold will do an average alpha of 550, while ATGMs will do 1200. Fully upgraded, 4,000 hit points, 71 kilometers an hour top speed unboosted, 480 meters of view range, and its moving and still concealment is 474 meters and 447 meters respectively. So there we go. Those are the high level stats, but we need to dig a little deeper to find out why this tank is at the bottom of my list. We'll start off with the types of ammunition and the guns available. Other Russian heavies, such as the T-72BU, have a selection of top guns. On the BU, you can select a high explosive firing gun, or you can select the ATGM gun. That flexibility is very, very nice because it means you've got variety in the playstyle. And for me, I take the HE gun because of things like light tanks and the Object 477. On top of that, we have the minimum arm distance for ATGMs, and when you're playing on a map like this, the ATGMs become near useless because you just don't have the range, you don't have the space, you don't have the speed. They just become a hindrance rather than a help. And in this game, I don't fire a single ATGM. And for that reason, the gun feels limiting. The ammunition feels limiting. And on top of that, the reload for this gun is slow. It feels very, very slow. For Era 3 heavies, it's got a, again with no crew or equipment, its rate of fire is 6.98 rounds a minute. 7 rounds a minute. That is, you notice that when you're playing this thing. It just feels too long for a top Era 3 heavy. And that means it's got a DPM of 3,839, which, you notice that. You really notice that. So from a gun point of view, it's really not that great. From a vehicle point of view, it likes to get set on fire. You've already seen me catch on fire once this game. And on top of that, the armor just is lacking. The armor is lacking in ways that makes it look more, well, it feels more like a medium. And you've got this enormous ammo rack on the back of the turret. It will get set on fire. It will lose its head. It can't reload quick enough. The armor doesn't hold up. Yeah, it... That is why it is bottom of my list. It's a bit of a shame. I feel like this tank could have been amazing. It could have been great. But something has to take bottom place. And in my case, it is the Object 640 Black Eagle. Not a bad game there. 9,731 damage with 1,500 assists. So a 10k combined game. But hey, this tank is lacking, and that's why it's number 9 on my list. So, moving on then, we now have number 8 on the list. And number 8, well, it's the Type 92. For those of you that have been watching my bottom 10 tech tree series, you'll know that that list is full of Chinese tanks. And what that tells you is, if no one is playing the tanks leading up to the top Era 3 heavy, then you're not going to see many of the top Era 3 heavy, which is exactly what the Type 92 is. This is the top of the Chinese line, and you don't see many of these about. And the best thing I can say about this tank is that It's not great. It's not terrible, though. I mean, the 640 is a tank that I would say is borderline terrible because it's lacking in so many different ways. The Type 90 isn't lacking in the same way, but it is lacking enough to make it number 8 on my list. And as you're seeing here, I've had my ammo rack hit already, and I've been slapped by an ATGM already. I'm not bouncing any incoming rounds at all. Bang again. At this point, I work out where the shots are coming from, and I realise, hey, you're up there. There you are. BMP3. But again, take another hit. The armour on this tank doesn't hold up. It's a big target. It's a big flat-sided rear. It's a big flat tank, this one. And for that reason, it just doesn't hold up all that well. So from a statistics point of view, let's take a look and see what it's got going for it. So 590mm of pen on standard, 643mm on gold, which is what I'm firing in this game, 180mm on secondary high explosive. Standard and gold, 580 alpha each. That's not bad. That's how I did a 600 plus roll there on the BMP3, which is, hey, you know, you can do a lot worse than that. And the high explosive, 720. It's got 3,950 hit points, fully upgraded, 70 kilometers an hour top speed, unboosted, 495 meters of view range, and it's moving in still concealment of 482 meters and 465 meters, respectively. So, at a very high level, this tank doesn't look terrible. Now, I'd be lying if I said this was a terrible tank. It's not. But the problem it's got is that there are things out there that are just better. If you play this tank right, it can do very, very well. It's just those right moments don't come around all that often. And this game happens to be one of them because the enemy team is coming around this corner one at a time. That Chieftain Mark 11 made a right mess of that because bottom tier heavy against a couple of top tiers, you're not going to win that. That Merc, you know, again, not playing all that sensibly, drove around the corner by himself, no support. Same for the STRV here. So, you know, in this game, this is why I've chosen this game. Things have to line up for you. But as you can see, I'm not bouncing any incoming rounds. Nothing is bouncing off of this thing. And that's where this thing gets let down. I say that, I just bounce around. I've bounced 2 rounds this game, 805 block damage. But again, another hit goes straight in. It's this tank. I mean, this tank sums up the entire feel of the Chinese line. Excuse me. They're not great. They're not terrible. It's like, oh man, it doesn't have to. I feel like this line needs some love, and it's very difficult to play when you've got a brain dead teammate like that just shoving you around because, you know, Ooga Booga wants to use big club and bang, bang, bang on enemy team, you know. Anyway, Type 90, yeah, there you go. So I'm second place on the team, 4 kills, 6,736 damage. It's not a bad result, but you've got to have things line up for you in the Type 90. It's not a game-winning tank. And for me, that is why it's number 8 on my list. Okay. Moving on up, we now have number 7, the T-72 M2E Moderna. This is number 7 on my list because it's got the gimmick of the dual autocannons, which is nice. Nice to have that bit of variation and some impressive gun elevation there. It's nice to have this variety. It's nice to have that. But that's really all this tank has got going for it. It is a weak T-72 that's got dual autocannons. There are better T-72s in the game. T-72BU is... I'm looking at you. Yeah, this is a tank that I would recommend you get if you're tired of doing... This is going to sound really weird, but... if you're tired of doing well and you want a challenge, get the T-72 M2E because it's a T-72. The armor doesn't hold up all that well, but you do have this rapid rapid ATGM. ATGM autocannon. Sorry, my bad, misspeaking. And that right there, what you saw just there, is exactly why this thing is number 7 on my list, because it's got that little, it's got a party piece. It's got that little bit of, hey, that's fun, that's interesting, but it only works in very, very specific circumstances. Similar to the Type 90, it's not terrible, but it needs the stars to line up, and things have got to be just right for it. And as you can see here, side of a T-72BU, autocannon was not going through. EE has 30mm of side armor, so yes, we'll be fine there, but anything else, you're just not going to be effective unless you're firing at the weak sides of light tanks, and even the angled front of a Bradley will bounce this thing. And as you're seeing there, a Stormer, we're not going through a Stormer, so it's like, well, it makes a lot of noise, there's a lot of flashing, there's a lot of effects, you can feel like you're being very effective with this thing, but in reality you're just not. That's a lot of ammunition that's gone down range and have only done just over 3,000 damage. So from a stats point of view, let's take a look at the M2E. So 606mm a pen on standard rounds, 738mm a pen on gold, and 155 on secondary high explosive. Standard will do an average of 550 alpha. Gold will do an average of 565. So gold and standard aren't the same. We're getting into the pay to win territory here, because you fire gold, you're going to be more doing more damage. So yeah, definition pay to win right there. We do have secondary high explosive, 700 alpha, which is nice. It's nice to have the high explosive because, as you saw just there, there is a 477 on the team. I can't remember if I fire high explosive at that 477. I don't think I do. But it's nice to have the high explosive option. And again, coming to the autocannon, well, it's okay. You know, you saw me shred the side of an EE, but really 87mm of pen on the standard rounds, doing 10 alpha each. Yeah, there's an autocannon in Era 2 that we all know that does a heck of a lot more than that. So yeah, the autocannon here, it's a party piece. Shell landing outside my aim reticle there, not great. But again, you know, if you want that kind of, hey, I've got a gimmick here, you know, I've got something slightly different, slightly interesting, get the M2E. Because yeah, it does have that going for it, which is quite nice. From a gun performance point of view, it's got a rate of fire of 7.79 rounds a minute, which, you know, it's following the trend. The 640 was 7. The Type 90 was 7.5, we're now at 7.79. So the rate of fire is increasing as we move up this list. And its DPM of 4,284 is good. It's slightly less than the Type 90, but hey, you know, you've got the gimmick of the autocannons. That's what you've got. That's the sort of... it's a party piece that only some people will find interesting. So you'll be that weird guy at the party that is like, what's this guy up to? You know, that's the kind of vibe you get from this thing. Some people love it, some people won't. It's not always that effective, but when it is effective, it's very effective because the rate of fire is insane. But yeah, the T-72 M2E, it's a weak T-72 really with autocannons. That's all I can say about it. It's the armor doesn't hold up all that well, and well, I mean, yeah, we took the Weasel out, but we took a hit, and with a last alive, I think the autocannon could use some love, because really, taking that long to take out a Weasel, I mean, again, Era 2, we don't really need to comment. You know, there's some balance issues in the game from autocannons, but hey, the T-72 M2E, it's not terrible. It's not great. It's a bit of a gimmick. It's got that party piece to it, which I wouldn't recommend you get immediately. But we did 8,102 damage with 2,174 assists, so 10k combined. Again, not great, not terrible, but it's unique. So if you want that, then go ahead and get the M2E. It's fun, but it is number 7 on my list. Alright then, we are now on to number 6 on this list, and this is where things start to get a little bit different. There are 9 tanks in total, so for me, they've kind of been broken down into 3 sets of 3. The bottom 3 that we've covered are just, they're not very good. Doesn't matter which way you spin it, they're not very good. That's the bottom line. The middle 3 are tanks that are good, but they do need certain circumstances for them to really shine. And the Merc 3 is number 6. And it's a very simple reason for this thing being number 6. This is not a bad tank. I want to stress that immediately. This is not a bad tank, but it has an enormous front lower plate. And that is the weak point. If you want to shoot a Merc, you just fire straight through the lower plate and you will go through. That's why it's number 6 on my list. The rate of fire is superb. The accuracy is good of the gun. Everything about this is great. You know, the mobility, the performance of the gun, the accuracy, it's all good. But it's let down by this one enormous glaring weakness. And that's exactly why I'm playing the way I'm playing here. I'm falling back because I know I cannot brawl face to face with everything that's coming around that corner. I need to flank around because my armor will not protect me. I cannot count on my armor to protect me. The turret armor, yes, the turret armor will be fine, but this enormous frontal plate is the massive, massive weak point. When I'm firing ATGMs or any other round at a Merc 3, I kind of like firing at Merkavas because it's almost like, yeah, you've got a massive weak point. I don't have to work that hard to hit you. And you're free damage in a way. I mean, if I'm firing face on against an EE or a Leopard 2A5 or an M1A Abrams, you kind of have to work a little bit harder. You've got to aim for the driver's hatch. You've got to aim for the cupola. You've got to try and shoot through the front track wheel above the track and aim for the weak side armor. You kind of have to work for it. But when you're fighting a Merkava, you don't have to work that hard, and that's why it's number 6 on my list. So let's take a look at the stats and see what it's got going for it. So 584mm of pen on standard rounds, 643 on gold, and 800mm of pen on secondary high explosive. Sorry, not explosive, ATGMs. You've got 530 average alpha on gold and standard, and 1025 average alpha on the ATGMs. Now, the same ATGM conversation does apply here, and I'll just break. I remember this game with the amount of red on the team. I have no idea how I survived this. I'll let you carry on watching. So the ATGM thing does come up again, but the reason this isn't affected as much by the ATGM only situation is because the gun is so good. The performance of this gun is incredibly good, and that's why the ATGM issue doesn't really matter. The Merc can fire 8.82 rounds a minute. That's very quick. That's much quicker than the tanks we've been looking at so far. You put crew and equipment in there, it's going to be very, very rapid. I mean, the reload there is 5 seconds. That means you're firing 12 rounds a minute. That is very, very good. The DPM will be higher than this, but stock, no crew equipment, 4,675. The gun can outperform the issue with the ATGMs. It just can. And that is fantastic. The gun on this tank is not bad. It is accurate, it reloads very quickly, it hits very hard, and it doesn't miss. It really doesn't miss. And as you're seeing here, I have no idea. Not a clue how I managed to survive that. There were red tanks everywhere. There were a lot of Rickies there, but yeah, maybe that was part of the chaos. We're not the smartest bunch, are we? But there we go. The Merkava 3. It's one of those tanks that, like I said, it's good. It is good. I'm not going to say this is a bad tank, but it does need circumstances to line up for it to play optimally, is what I'll say. It's got good hit points. The armor is relatively good on the turret. But yeah, It needs a helping hand from RNG. It needs a helping hand from the enemy team. And, well, if you want to get the Merkava, then we're in the middle 3 tanks now. These are tanks that I would start to say, yeah, if you've got the best tanks in the game already, then consider these ones. But I wouldn't go for the Merkavas immediately. Unless you're Israeli and you just want your home tanks, then, you know, obviously you go ahead and do that. But I wouldn't immediately go for these. So 9,950 damage, 1,338 assists. So another a 10k combined game. This tank can perform. It really can perform, but it needs certain things to line up, and that is why it's number 6 on my list. Okay then, that's number 6 out the way. Let's move on to number 5. Now, some of you may be questioning, Ricky, why is the Leclerc number 5? Well, again, these are the middle 3 tanks. These are tanks that need certain things to line up for them in order for them to do well. The Leclerc is a solid heavy. From a gun point of view, it's good. From an armor point of view, it's... Now, the Leclerc may be one of those tanks where you've shot at it and you've thought, man, this is a tough nut to crack. The glaring weak point, and it's very similar with the Challenger 2. We'll get to the Challenger 2 in a little bit, but the gun mantlet on the Leclerc is the same for the Leclerc T4. The area around where the gun protrudes from the turret, that's the weak point. And that is the reason why this is number 5 on my list. Another reason it's number 5 on my list is, as you can see here, the gun accuracy isn't quite what I would like it to be. It's not as accurate as other heavies in Era 3. So the combination of it having a glaring frontal weak spot and not the best gun, that's why it's number 5 on my list. The Leclerc can be terrifying to face. The armor is good, but it's one of those, as soon as you know where the obvious weak point is, as soon as you know where its weakness is, it suddenly becomes less of a threat. And if you're in one of the better Era 3 heavies, you can just outplay the Leclerc by shooting it straight through the front of the turret. It's like, you know, you've taken the sting away from the Scorpion. As soon as it doesn't have that, it's like, okay, well, you're not really that much of a threat to me anymore. And that is why this is number 5 on my list. That doesn't mean it's a bad tank, though. I'll say it again, it's not a bad tank, but it does have that one weakness that is easily exploited, and for me, it pulls it down. So, from a statistics point of view, let's take a look and see what it's got. So, 633mm of pen on standard. That's very good. That's very, very good. 700 on gold. That is stupendously good. 150mm on secondary high explosive. Gold and standard will do an average of 550. High explosive will do 690. Fully upgraded, 3,910 hit points. Unboosted top speed of 72, so it's not slow. View range of 565 meters, and moving and still concealment of 480 meters and 461 meters. So all in all, this is not a bad tank. The gold round, which I'm firing at the moment, is superbly good. Tracked the 477 there, but I am paying attention to the mini-map and having to follow the team around because their team is very, very active on the southern edge of the map. My platoon mate is getting completely overrun. Russ. I'm platoon with Russ. He's in the 640. Yeah, 640 go. Yeah, we've covered that already. But the Leclerc, yeah, this is not a bad tank by any stretch. It's good. If you know what you're doing in the Leclerc, this will be a very, very nice tank for you. But as I've mentioned earlier, the accuracy of the gun does seem to be an issue, and this is slightly confusing to me because I have checked the in-game statistics. The accuracy on this gun is not really any better or worse than the other tanks on this list that are higher up. But for whatever reason, I just noticed that, hey, this gun at range, especially on a map like this one where you need your longer range shots to be just that little bit more accurate. I noticed, is it a Sigma thing? It might be a Sigma thing, but the accuracy just doesn't seem to be what I want it to be. That said though, the DPM is good with 4,714, which will get higher as you put crew and equipment in, and rate of fire 8.57 rounds. And you've got a 5 point, for me, with my crew and equipment, 5.1 second reload, which, you know, it's only 0.1 of a second slower than the Merc that we just looked at. So this is very similar to the Merc. The gun is good. The armor is solid until people find out what your weak point is. As soon as they know what your weak point is, you're done. But the weak point on the Leclerc is smaller than it is on the Merkava, which is why I've put the Leclerc above the Merkava. So 7,126 damage, 820 assist, 2 kills. Good game. That's a good game in the Leclerc. But that weak point and the gun accuracy being what it is, that is why this tank is number 5 on my list. So here we are. We have arrived at the top tank. If we're talking about it in brackets of 3, this is the top tank of the middle bracket of 3. This is the Leopard 2A5. And straight away, you can see me testing its weakness. We wiggle left, right. The Leopard 2A5 does not like turning. This thing is, from a frontal armor point of view and from a gun point of view, this is a phenomenally good tank. But it hates turning. It does not like turning. But before we get on to the lengthier conversation about the Leopard 2A5, let's take a look at its stats. So 590mm of pen on standard rounds, not bad. 710mm on gold, very good. And 150mm on secondary high explosive. Gold and standard will do 510, so yeah, you know, I've done a review of the Leopard 2A5 before, and statistically wise, the gun stats are at the bottom end of Era 3, but the gun accuracy more than makes up for that deficiency. You could call it a deficiency. You know, that area where it's lacking. 4,100 hit points, 72 kilometers an hour unboosted top speed, 535 meters of view range, and 477 meters of moving concealment, 454 meters of still concealment. So, very high level. The Leopard 2A5 is not the best, but it's another one of those tanks. That's why we've got this middle bracket where when things line up for it, it does incredibly well. And this right here is exactly where it does well. It's surrounded by team. There's support for me. I am behind cover and my frontal armor is facing towards the enemy. The Leopard 2A5 becomes weak when it's exposed in the open and things can shoot it in the side. You've got autocannons in Era 3, AMX-32, AMX-40, the light tanks, the BMP-3. Those autocannons will shred the side of the Leopard 2A5. You will suffer if you are caught out in the open. But as you can see here, if your frontal armor is kept facing towards the enemy, you are a powerhouse. You're an absolute powerhouse. Let's have a look at the gun then. So, yes, the alpha isn't the highest. The penetration on gold rounds is very good. But what makes this gun so good is the accuracy. You can see the size of the aim reticle there. It is minuscule. It's absolutely tiny. The accuracy, unboost, again, no crew, no equipment in this thing. The statistic for the accuracy is 0.19, which is very good. That is amazingly good. I believe the Leclerc, we picked up on the Leclerc for not having great accuracy. I believe the Leclerc is 0.23? No, 0.24. The Leclerc is 0.24. Leopard, 0.19. This gun is pinpoint accurate. Its rounds will go exactly where you aim them, which at ranges like this is very, very nice because you can aim for specific weak points on specific tanks and you will hit them. Now we're starting to see where the Leopard 2A5 falls down. We talked about it, doesn't like turning. Trying to run away, it's not the most nimble thing out there. It really isn't. I mean, it's not slow, 72 kilometers an hour unboosted. If you put engine on tracks on there, you'll get it up to what, 79, 80 roughly. But you can see it here. I've resigned myself to the fact that this is going to have to be a face-on fight. I have got to face the enemy and do the best I can to take out as much as I can. I'm the last alive versus 10. This isn't gonna go well, but that doesn't mean we don't go down swinging. Look at the block damage here. Look at that. I talked about the frontal armor being good. If you can stay face on to the enemy team, you will do incredibly well. If your team supports you, obviously, everyone needs team support. But the team folded in that game, but 9,120 block damage. That's an example of how much you can block if you're face on. As soon as they come around your side or your rear, you're done. So that's where this tank, again, it needs things to line up. And that is why it's number 4 on my list. Okay then, here we are. We've arrived. This is the top 3. I remember playing this during a stream series, trying to work out where these tanks all fitted together. This was tough. The top 3 were difficult to decide. And the criteria for me, for top 3, is all around playability. A lot of the tanks that we've gone through so far, the bottom 3, they're just not brilliant at any one thing in particular. The middle 3 are good, but they need certain things to line up to be in their favor. The top 3 don't really need anything to line up at all. These top 3 tanks can just perform. Doesn't matter what they're facing, doesn't matter what they're up against, they can just do well regardless. This, number 3 on my list, is the T-72BU, and there's a very simple reason for this being number 3. But before we get to that reason, let's take a look at the statistics. So, 606mm of pen on standard rounds. Very good. 697mm on gold rounds. Not the best, but hey, good enough. 750mm on the ATGM. So this, I'll just break here for a second to say this has the choice between high explosive and ATGMs. So the stats that I'm sharing you here, 750mm of pen on the ATGMs. Standard and gold will do 550 average alpha. The ATGMs will do 1200. If you want to know the statistics for the high explosive gun, 155mm on the penetration of high explosive and 690 alpha on the high explosive itself. So from a gun point of view, it's good. It's very good. 4050 hit points, fully upgraded. 71 kilometers an hour top speed unboosted, not slow. 520 meters of view range, decent, but true vision kind of negates that. Moving and still concealment, 481 meters of moving concealment, 462 meters of still concealment. So the BU, this is number 3. Why is this number 3? Well, it's one simple reason: gun depression. It's a Russian heavy. It doesn't have the gun depression of the Western tanks, and that's it. That is the only reason this gun is in the position that it is. It's got 6 degrees of gun depression. That is the only limiting factor for this tank. Everything else about this tank is superb. Rate of fire, 7.59 rounds a minute. That is good. It's not the best, but it's good enough to be effective. What's my reload? 5.8 seconds. Hey, it could be worse, could be better, but the armor holds up in this thing, as you're seeing here. We're blocking, we're bouncing. We're hull down, we're bouncing. That's exactly what you want from a top performing heavy. Not only that, it's got the DPM, 4,174 meters, which again, put the right crew and kit in, you'll do fantastically well. This is a solid tank. The armor holds up. It's maneuverable, the gun performs well, and you've got the option of high explosive, and you've got the option of ATGMs. This really does tick all the boxes for playstyle. It really does. If you want ATGMs, you go right on ahead. If you want high explosive, which is what I played because of the 477, yeah, again, you take it. This tank is so versatile. It is so versatile. It is a fantastic tank to play. It's a lot of fun. And like I've said, the only reason this is number 3... Whoops, missed that shot. The only reason this is number 3 is because of the 6 degrees of gun depression. I can't say that there's not much bad I can say about the T72BU. If you really force me to, what I would say is limited ammunition. I mean, at the moment, I've got 15 high explosive with me because, 477. I probably don't need to take 15. I could probably take 10. But I am down to 6 rounds of standard armor piercing. I mean, we're splitting hairs right now. I mean, come on. We're on 8,786 damage, 3,300 blocked, 1,940 assist. Yeah, this is not a bad tank. This is absolutely not a bad tank. There's nothing I can say beyond what I've already said that is bad about this tank. If you want if you want a solid heavy, the Russian T72, the BU here, this is not a bad choice at all. This is really not a bad choice, especially when you've got the enemy team on the run. They're distracted. There is a weasel down there doing its thing to distract the enemy team. This is ideal. This is an ideal scenario for the T72BU. We're doing incredibly well. The team's going to win this one. It's not been a steamroll, and the T72BU, it shines. It really does shine, and the line up to the BU is also not bad. At Era 2, top of Era 2, you've got the T72AV, which is also a stupendously good Era 2 heavy. Probably one of the best Era 2 heavies. I can't fault it. Excuse me. I cannot fault this line, really. The other lines, the 640, you've got to get through the T80s, the M2E. There are struggles. All of the other tanks, I've not covered the lines. A lot of the other tanks have their struggles. The Leopard 2A5, we've just covered that one. It's a good tank, but you've got to get through Era 2 with the glass armor of the Leopard 1s. And it's just a struggle. However, the T72BU line, this is a pleasure. Almost a pleasure all the way through the line. The bottom of Era 2 can be a bit of a struggle, but once you get to the top of Era 2, it's wonderful. The AV is a superb tank. All the way through Era 3, absolutely fantastic. And here we are, we've done over 10,000 damage in the BU. Bit of a ram. There goes the last player. 11,043 damage. I can't fault it, guys. I can't. Gun depression and ammo count. That's it. That's it. That's all there is to the BU. That's it. I cannot fault it anymore. It's an amazing tank. It really is an amazing tank. And that, for me, is why it is number 3 on my list. We're at the top 3 now, guys. This is number 3 on my list. So here we are. We're at number 2. And this one was very difficult for me to place. Very, very difficult for me to place. If you watched my live stream series where we played all 9 of these tanks to get the footage, to get to grips with them, to get to understand how they feel and where I felt they ranked compared to each other, you'll know, if you watch that live stream series, you'll know that the Charlie 2 was number 1 for a while. And I will come clean. I will admit that the only reason I had the Charlie 2 number 1 was because I'm British. The Charlie 2 is the British heavy. But facts being what they are, they don't care about your allegiances, they don't care about your likes or dislikes, they are the cold hard truth. So the Charlie 2, in my opinion, is not the number 1 heavy of Era 3. If you know your tank at this point, if you know your tanks in Era 3, you'll know exactly which tank is number 1. But I'm not going to say it yet. We'll save that for later. We'll save that for the number 1 spot. The Charlie 2 takes the 2nd place, in my opinion. So let's take a look at the stats. We've got 590 mil of penetration on standard rounds, 730 millimeters of penetration on gold. Very good. And this is where things get a little unique. 310 on secondary, Hesh. Gold and standard rounds will do an average of 550 alpha, but the Hesh will do 680. Now, I will take the excuse me, I will take the extra 140 millimeters of pen over, losing out on 10 alpha. The Hesh can be very effective against certain mediums, lightly armored mediums, and light tanks. It can be very effective in the right circumstance. I don't use it all that often, but it can be very effective. So that's just something to note about the Charlie 2. It's got unique ammunition. Fully upgraded, 4,000 hit points. Top speed, unboosted, 72 kilometers an hour. View range of 545 meters. And moving and still concealment of 481 meters and 462 meters. So all in all, this is a solid heavy. It is a very solid heavy. Rate of fire, we'll see, is 7.89 without crew or equipment. The reload there, 5.6 seconds. If I remember correctly, the BU was 5.8 seconds, so we're 0.2 seconds faster on the reload. I mean, unless the game is, unless your game really comes down to the wire, you're not going to notice 0.2 seconds. But hey, from a stats point of view, yes, you can argue the Charlie 2 gun is better. Damage per minute of 4,340, that's good. That is good. Crew and equipment going there, it goes up. It goes up. And, again, that's why this is number 2 on the list. It's just solid. It's a solid gun. The accuracy is 0.22, but for whatever reason, I don't know why, maybe a Sigma thing, it feels better than that. The Leclerc was 0.23, if I remember correctly. This is 0.22. Not a massive difference, but this gun feels so much more accurate than the Leclerc. I don't know if that's a mix-up with stats and just how vehicles play. It's why I don't really like judging tanks based on their stats. I want to play them, see how they play, and then decide. But there's a very good reason why this is number 2, in my opinion. Performance-wise, mobility, good. Armor, the average of its armor, front, sides, rear, good. Gun, accuracy, good. Penetration, good. Alpha, good. The one thing that pulls the Charlie 2 down is the frontal weak spot. The lower plate on the Charlie 2 is quite big, and it's not very well armored. That is the reason why the Charlie 2 is number 2 on the list, because even though it's very good at playing every environment, it's good at fighting every single tank, it's just got that one weakness. And it's one of those, as soon as you know what the weakness is, it's beatable. But you can play this thing in a way that means that your weakness is not exposed at all times. And it's also very nice when the enemy tanks like this T-80, who doesn't even face you or fight you. It's brilliant. But the Charlie 2 does have the frontal weak point, and that is why it's number 2. Otherwise, this is a phenomenal tank. If you can protect that lower plate, you can see it there in the MVP screen, that is quite a big weakness. It's not as big as the sides and rear of a Leopard 2A5, but it is still there. And from a performance point of view, it's very, very nice because it's got 10 degrees of gun depression, beats the BU by 4 degrees, and the BU's only got 6. So 9,503 damage, 2,596 assist. The Charlie 2, it's phenomenal. I've 3 marked it. I love this tank, but it is not number 1. This is number 2 on my list. Here we are. We've arrived. Number 1 on the list. This is the M1A2 Abrams. And like I mentioned with the Charlie 2, if you know your tanks, you already knew that the Abrams was going to be number 1, because that's the only tank I hadn't mentioned at that point. The M1A2 Abrams is, in my opinion, the best top Era 3 heavy in the game. Now, I know the majority of my viewers are American, so you guys are probably jumping for joy at the fact that your tank, your nation's tank, is number 1. It is superb. I mean, I can't fault it. It's not the best at any one thing. It doesn't have the best frontal armor. It doesn't have the fastest reload. It's not the best in any particular category. But what it does have is it's got enough going for it in different aspects that means it performs beautifully. This tank performs absolutely beautifully. It's quick enough to escape. It's not too slow to get run over. The reload is fast enough to be effective, but it's not lightning quick. The armor isn't the best, but it's enough to support you and have your back. The Abrams is just an all-round quality vehicle in this game. And it's not just the vehicle itself that is so good. The line leading up to the Abrams is also fantastic as well. If you're a new player and you want to know what line you should play first, I think the majority of people, and I will recommend to you, play the American line. You've got some heavies in Era 1, T-34, the M103, M103 also in Era 2, which I would play the heavy line personally. But the mediums, you've got the M60, M60A1, M60A2, M60A3. The A2 and the A3 are a variety. You've got ATGMs and high explosive spam, which can be great fun in the A2. But then the A3 itself is also a superbly good medium. All of those American tanks are fantastically good. And even into Era 3, the M1 Abrams is a bottom of Era 3. The M1 Abrams is lightning quick, and the reload and the accuracy of the gun is phenomenal. The M1 really is a superb tank. If any of the tanks in that line let it down, I would say it's the M1A1, but even so, I mean, I say let down. It's not really a letdown. The engine is stock all the way through, but you could, I mean, with this list, you could be playing, I don't know, you could be playing the Chinese, the Chinese tanks. Playing the Americans is really, really not that bad at all. And that, for me, is what had it's not just the M1A2. This tank itself is very good, but it's the entire game experience. It's the entire line leading up to this tank. So, speaking of this tank, let's take a look at the stats. So we've got 592mm of pen on standard rounds. That's good. 740 on gold. Of course, the Abrams had to outdo the Charlie 2 by 10mm of pen on its gold rounds. But hey, the Charlie 2 has still got the Hesh. The Abrams has got 150mm on its secondary high explosive. Gold and standard will do an average of 535, which is interesting. Normally we've got solid, round numbers, 540, 550, but no, 535 here. It is what it is. 670 average alpha on the secondary high explosive. Fully upgraded, 4050 hit points. Max top speed is 68 kilometers an hour. View range 550 meters, and its moving and still concealment is 478 meters and 455 meters. So there we go. We've talked about the experience of the American line. We've talked about what you've got to look forward to, but that doesn't tell you why this is, in my opinion, the best heavy in Era 3. It's a very simple reason, and it's the complete opposite of the reason why the Charlie 2 is second place, in my opinion. The Charlie 2 has that frontal weak point. The Abrams does have frontal weak points, but they're not as large, they're not as glaringly obvious, and for that reason, the Abrams is better. If you shoot the driver's hatch, you'll go through. If you shoot the commander's hatch, you'll also go through. But other than that, this is a very tough tank to pen frontally. It's got side armor, and it's just a bit of everything. This tank is a bit of everything. It performs well in every single circumstance, and I've showed a lot of defeats here because I want to prove that these tanks aren't just going to run over the enemy team and win every game for you. They do get defeated, but they are still very, very good tanks. They're still solid, and the Abrams, in my opinion, is the best because its gun performs well, it's mobile, it can move, the armor holds up. So mobility, firepower, and armor, it's all there in the Abrams, and that for me is why the M1A2 Abrams is the best tank, the best heavy Era 3 tech tree tank in the entire game. Alright guys, that is all I've got for this ranking of the 9 top tanks, heavies in Era 3. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, if not a dislike, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.